H-A-T. It's in the name.
This episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast is brought to you in partnership with MinistryLeague.com. We would love for more people to discover this show, so please rate and review us on iTunes or your podcast provider. Feel free to share on your social media and subscribe at benandtravis.com for the free ebook 28 Days of Focused Living. Welcome into the Helping Healing Humor with Ben and Travis podcast. I'm Travis Creasy, the pulpit minister at Westgate Church of Christ in Dothan, Alabama. That's Ben Hayes. He's the pulpit minister at Highland Park, counselor at Mars Hill Bible School, three-chord counseling, all the good stuff. And then somewhere there, he finds a place to parent people as well. So how you doing, Ben?
That's right. I'm doing pretty good. It was a good weekend. Had a lot of stuff going on. First cross country meets. You guys had kind of an event that y'all did. The churches had some events. Had the HCU benefit dinner, which was phenomenal. With what was it called? Kicks and Licks. Kicks and Licks band. They're pretty amazing with the brass and the woodwinds and all that good stuff, but they kind of surprised me. Then you had Nate Oates, the GOAT in basketball. So we're really excited about that. Travis got to, go over the loudspeakers and diss me in front of everybody. So there was that. That was fun. Anyway, Will got to go to most of those things. So how you doing, Will?
I'm doing well. I didn't get to go to the cross country thing, but
y'all had another event.
Yeah, we actually were in Huntsville at a end addiction walk from a family member that lost their life to addiction. So that was really cool seeing how many people came together in the Huntsville area. Yeah, several hundred were a part of that. So it was just a really neat thing to be a part of and to see. This was my first year attending it. Okay. And it was just really, it was a cool, sometimes it's got a weird vibe to it and you're honoring people and trying to remember people. But in the same, there was a lot of recovering people that were there that were walking and just a lot of churches were present, a lot of community action groups. So it was it's a cool thing to see when a lot of people get together with one focus on what they can accomplish.
Yeah, of course, awesome. Will is the youth minister at Highland Park Church of Christ. He also teaches Bible there at Mars Hill Bible School, and something that's near and dear to his heart, he works with Walk for Water, which we've had on a couple of times on the episode. We've participated. We've raised money for Walk for Water, and so it is near and dear to our hearts as well. And so thanks to an anonymous sponsor, they have sponsored us and requested that we would spotlight ministries that we're connected with. We may cover a couple down here at Westgate that we're connected with, some with Highland Park, some with Mars Hill. And so today we want to give Will a couple of minutes here to kind of talk about Walk for Water before we get to our main discussion for the day.
Yeah, Walk for Water is I call it a branch of the tree that is Healing Hands International out of Nashville. You've probably heard of the disaster relief trucks that go in. And so Walk for Water is just a branch of Healing Hands, does a lot of great work, a lot of cool things. So we host about 70 to 80 walks per year. That can be schools, organizations, that can be church groups, really just anybody that wants to get together to sponsor wells in third world countries all over the world. And so it takes, all you have to do is pick a date, and someone from Healing Hands like myself or one of our other representatives will come out. We usually host a 4-mile walk to honor the women and girls that walk 4 miles every day to get clean water for their families, whether that be to cook with, to drink, to wash clothes. It's amazing how readily available we have water here in the U.S. And the average person uses 55 gallons of water inside per day. So that doesn't count pools, watering flowers, washing cars, any of that. And so it's just a huge need all over the world. A lot of people die every year just from the bacteria that they drink in their water. They're walking 4 miles to get what we would call dirty water. And so Healing Hands comes in, and every 7,500 that we raise sponsors a well. And being a girl dad, as all of us are, it's near and dear to my heart. I was able to teach a high school class in Africa with 20 girls. And those 20 girls were in there solely because wells had been dug in their community. And so not only are we providing physical need, we're providing educational needs, and then we're providing spiritual needs. A lot of the churches in these communities are built around the well. And so every day as people come, literally John chapter 4, as people come to get water, there are usually preachers holding Bible studies, church groups that are worshiping. And so it is just a huge evangelistic effort. There was a well that was dug, I believe, in Nigeria that was sent to us not too long ago. And on the celebration day, the village came together to celebrate, and they had like 13 baptisms that afternoon. And so it's just doing an incredible thing. The past few years, we have raised over 1.2 million every year. And so it's just an incredible thing. And until you have seen a well in a third world country and the excitement that it brings with clean water, you really just can't grasp it. But if you want to host a walk, come to a walk, you can go to hhi.org/W4, the number 4W. So Walk for Water. They're at Healing Hands website, and you can see all the local walks that we have. They're literally from California to New York. Mm-hmm. I'll be in New York next month. And so it's just a great ministry doing a lot of incredible things. And if you want to get in touch with the podcast, I can always get you information there. So pick a date, host a walk for us, come join a walk, and be a part of an incredible ministry impacting a lot of lives.
Well, that's a perfect transition into what we want to talk about today. Love in action. It means a lot to say that you love people, and we certainly need to say that. We need to make sure the message is clear that God loves those who are created in his image, and he has a deep affection for them. But there's also that aspect of backing up. Watching a Dallas Cowboys documentary, and Jimmy Johnson, the coach before one of the Super Bowls, speaking as they're going to win. He says they're going to win. And at the end, after they won, he said, hey, if you're going to talk the talk, you better walk the walk. And so there you go, Will. You can use that for Walk for Water. We can use that for what we're talking about today. But Ben, you kind of brought up the thought, maybe in connection with a real person who lived and walked the walk.
Yeah. Like 1938, a guy named Nicholas Winton was getting ready to go on a ski trip. And a friend of his said, hey, we need to go to Prague instead. There's something kind of wild going on there. And of course, 1938, pre-World War II, there's already a lot of people fleeing from places that the Nazis were beginning to, try to take rule over. And they noticed there were just thousands of Jewish families in Prague. And what he noticed were the kids. There was kids everywhere. And of course, we talk about Walk for Water, or we talk about anything, it hits us when we see innocent people suffer, but it really hits us when we see innocent children suffering. And so he sees this situation happening around him, and he's like, not on my watch. And so he starts trying to find ways to get him and a group of people start this thing where it's like a kinder transport, I think is what they ended up calling it. And it's like, it was kids from babies up to teenagers, and they're trying to get them out of those areas where maybe their parents, they might have been Jews, or they may have been people who were scientific minds who needed, protecting because the Germans were going to get them, but their families were going to be. And so all of these different things. So they started this process of trying to get them to Great Britain, and they had foster parents lined up. Well, the crazy thing was he never really told anybody. Like, he did all this stuff with this group, but then when the war was over and everything, he went back to normal life, and even his wife had no idea what he had done. And she's going through the attic and finds this book that's got all of the names. It's got all of the picture, like a lot of pictures of the kids and how they had lined them up, and, who he had placed and when. And it's like 664 kids that he placed in foster care, just to get them away from the war. And the one that kind of was crazy was there was like 200 and something kids lined up to be transported the day that the war broke out. and he couldn't get them transported. And so he has no idea what happened to those 200, but that the plan was, so it could have been 800 and something kids or 900, and it would have continued. But when the war happened, it was impossible to do what they had been doing. And so, I showed that in chapel this morning, and then there's a clip out there that you can find if you look up his name. There's all kinds of stuff, but there's a clip of 50 years later. They invite him on a television show, and they reconnect. The lady that they were talking about was sitting next to him, and she didn't know it, and he didn't know it. And then they announced, "Hey, you saved this woman's life." And they tell her, "He's sitting next to you," and she just embraces him. And then they invite him on a couple of months later after they had kind of tried to go, "Hey, he would love to reconnect with some of you." And so they're sitting in the auditorium, and they said, if he saved your life, stand up. And like most of the people in the audience stood up, and it'll just kind of get you if you're not careful. So it's just really cool to see. So the connection that we made with that in chapel was, we can talk about loving each other, but do we really, when we see a need, do we really love each other? Do we really look out? Because, John says in 1 John chapter 3, don't be like Cain, who hated his brother. No murderer shows love. Well, of course he doesn't. That makes sense. And then he transitions to it and says, if you've got the world's goods and you see your brother in need, what are you going to do with that? And so don't love with just words, but love with deed and truth. So, that was kind of my challenge. I thought that's a good challenge for us to start the week is, how are we loving? Are we loving with just our words, or are we loving with actions?
Yeah, I think as we approach St. Jude, we have the children's book. We really try to help as much as we can. You think, and I'm sure, Ben, you've probably never done this, but I've done it on occasion. It's for the kids. I know at Riverside's Christian Academy's auction, the auctioneer will oftentimes, it's for the kids, everybody. And the interesting thing about that is how does God see us, right? He sees us as his children, and calls us to be like little children, to trust. I bring up St. Jude because, it's really hot out right now, hot outside. It'll be a little cooler there in December. But one thing that kind of motivates me is running through, we've talked about it at length, running through the hospital grounds and seeing those kids who are battling everything possible to survive. And they're out there for you. And I run that early one. So the ones that are out there for me are really trying to encourage people. And so it kind of gives you a little more gas in the engine to kind of keep going. And I think we were created that way to serve. If the Son of God came to serve instead of be served, if we're going to be like him, then there better be some hustle and that bustle when it comes to loving folks.
I think it's interesting in 1 John 4, if anyone says, "I love God," and hates his brother, he is a liar. For he who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God who he has not seen. And I've always thought about that. I think on some level we go, well, I don't hate them. I want what's best for them. I'm going, yeah, but then Jesus goes, hey, love the way I've loved you. And I think there's a big difference or discrepancy in what we consider loving our brother and what God considers loving our brother. And sometimes this is the way I was in school. I just want to do enough to get the degree. The C's get degrees and they usually become the bosses of the A's. But, on some level, I think as Christians, we find ourselves going, well, I hope things do work out for them. I hope that they're good. I just don't want to love them enough to help them get to where things are good. And I think on some level, God looks at that and goes, that's not what I meant when I said, loving the people that you're around. And I find it really intriguing that there's a lot of people every year at Marciel. I'll start off class and go, do you consider yourself a Christian? And every high school student in the student body at Marciel is, but yes, I've taught them all. And then you go, why you treat them like that? And go, because they treated me that way. I go, wait a second. if we're gonna commit to saying we're followers of Jesus, then there's a big difference in what that means.
So often, and I think that the difficulty, even in Jesus' day, is we have an internal priority list. And if you're like me, that priority list starts with me and then works its way out, benevolent anyways. And actually, it should start out there. And the last person is me. Now, we spend a lot of time in here talking about making sure that you're taking care of yourself and doing the things you need to do. And certainly, we've said it on an airplane, right? You want to put that mask on before you can help anybody else. And certainly we got to be connected to Jesus. But when we do connect to Jesus, it does rearrange that priority list into looking to others. I think in the first century, Jesus, I don't know that it's changed all that much, spends a lot of time talking about what it means to actually be holy. And it starts with how we treat others. And that is aligned by how we love God with all that we have.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something. The other passage that we've talked about a bunch that I kind of highlighted was Titus 3:14, and everything. If I don't know that I'd ever really thought about how many action words are in that, even though I love the passage and I've talked about it a bunch. The way, yes, I mean, our people must learn to engage in good deeds, to meet pressing needs so that they will not be unfruitful. So there's a lot of action in that. And so if we're not taking some action in love, then we're just talk. And, a relationship, you can wake up every morning and tell your wife you love her, but if you don't treat her as if you love her, it's really not going to make that great of a relationship. Same thing with your kids, same thing with, the people you work with and the people that you're around. And so there's so much to it that is doing something about the things around you. And so if we love our community, if we love our schools, if we love our churches, they really ought to be seen as places that love is in action. Even the verse for this year or this month at Mars Hill is let all that you do be done in love. So there's action involved in it, not just what we say.
I think it's important to remember that it doesn't take saving 600 lives to love.
Right.
Lindsay and I are amazed by Karen Mann, and Karen's just a sister in Jesus, a dear friend, a mentor, a friend of the podcast, and it's the simple things of anytime we've been through a loss with our family, there's a book in the mail within 3 days, and I don't know how she does it, that I wish I had her spiritual gifts, but it's just those little bitty things that show us, man, we are valuable to who she is because she took time, whether it took her 2 minutes or 2 hours, you always know, man, she cares about us and she loves us, but it wasn't even cooking this nice fancy meal or anything like that. Like I remember those moments more than I remember the people that actually stopped by and picked up a meal for us, because it was so significant, but it was such a small act that it was just, it made a huge difference. And so I don't think that it has to be, there are definitely people that do some incredible things, but I'm up at the church most every day and you see there's a lady at our church, Maureen Cagle, that she's at the building and she just finds little things to do that I go, I never would have thought of that. Mm-hmm. And when she's not there, you go, oh man, somebody does that. Yeah. And it's those things to me that just make such lasting impressions on my life. And so I think loving is not always doing these big things that everybody sees, but sometimes doing the things that people they never notice, and I think that's
another
cool.
Passage in 1 John. I've been in the elementary chapel, which is different than what I shared this with. I've been doing, since it is love, we've just been reading through 1 John, all the passages, and there are plenty of passages in First John about love. And so in chapter 4, another place in there, it says, for God is love. And so that's something that I kind of reminded them this morning of, is when you start trying to define who a person is, like how do we define who a person is? Well, we define Travis as he's the preacher at Westgate, or, who is Will, he's the youth minister, he's a Bible teacher, who is, and so like, what is it that defines us? And when we think about what defines God, he says, God is love. And if we are supposed to be like God, then what really should be our definition? What should define us? What is it that should stand out to people? Do people go, well, Travis is love, Will is love, Ben is love? They probably don't, but should they? Should one of the first things that comes to mind when people see us as Christians, should it be, well, Ben is, problematic, or Ben is argumentative, or Ben is
stressful,
impatient, or unloving, stressed out, whatever. What is it that we see about him? Well, I hope at least one of the words that they might use would be that Ben is love, Ben is patient, Ben is kind, Ben is joyful, some of those fruits of the Spirit that we see. And so, that's what God's defined as, and his followers should be kind of next in line with that.
People will know that you are my disciples by your love for one another, not how well you preach, how well you teach, how much you know, but by the way that you love people. And I think that's sometimes we miss.
Will, just what you just said, you could probably go to any preacher in town, any minister, and ask them, and they're probably not going to go to their favorite preacher. And if you went and said, hey, who's your favorite preacher? Sure. But if you're like, hey, who in your mind embodies the servant mentality, more than likely they're going to pick out somebody who does the background stuff that never gets a lot of attention. Just as you were saying that, Will, I was thinking about people here at Westgate, people at Riverside, everywhere I've been, the people that don't really get the play. And then to Ben, what you were saying, it's just who God is. I love things because I love you guys because you make my life better. We are very reactionary, cause and effect. And God loves, well, why would God love me like that? Well, it's who he is. It's who he is. It's just what he embodies. It's his defining characteristics. It's how he defines himself. And interesting enough, when, you see Moses goes, who am I going to tell them sent me? And I am that I am. And I think it was really because I think Paul even mentions this in his letter about don't be overwhelmed by the love of God. I pray, not that you withstand persecution, which there was that, and I'm sure he prayed about that, but that you wouldn't be paralyzed by the overwhelming love of God. And I think in Moses' day, it was just impossible to go to Pharaoh and go, well, love sent me. We think of love quite often in our society, but for much of history, love was a weakness. It was a weakness to be used. And that's what they did with Jesus. It was Jesus' love for us that he chose the cross and to be a servant rather than be served. So, love and action, of course, we would all point to Jesus as the embodiment of all of that. And so, guys, as we wrap up, a good, fun question. You guys are going to get tired of me as the good old-fashioned dislike has returned. I'll be wearing you out every weekend about what do you like and don't like, or whatever. But let's just think about the defining, like what you've actually kind of already mentioned it, Will, but what are some things, what's something maybe that somebody has done for you? You don't have to name names. That's just simple, like sending a book or whatever, but just simple. I know Whitney is homeschooling the kids this year, and they're going over just polite things, and so like, I think it's a week, maybe it's every day, but I think it's the week, the politeness of the week. And there's just a paper in our room that says smile. And it's like, remember to smile, or maybe I say a little more harshly, fix your face, that kind of thing. But, what's something that somebody does for you quite regularly that may just makes your day? And maybe you don't have to name names if you don't want to.
Well, there's been several people who've done similar things to this. I mean, Linda Williams was one here at school. She retired this year. Certainly miss her presence. Scarlett's doing a great job in the library, but like Linda was so good at just, fixing, like bringing us a little coffee thing with a note on it that said, "You guys are awesome. Appreciate what you do," or a little snack or piece of candy or whatever. It's probably a good thing this year that she's not here, because I don't need all that candy intake that she usually would bring and drop off. But, stuff like that. Judy Handback at church is really great about bringing, like, she'll just leave little things in my office, like something she's found somewhere. And, it's just little things like that. Destin does a really good job. She'll wake up just to go make me a cup of coffee before I come, or to make me one of those energy drinks that she's doing now. So it's like, I always appreciate that if she drags herself out of bed to do it, because she doesn't have to at this point. She doesn't have to come to school every day. But I like those little things. I think it's those small little gifts that people leave you that just say, "Hey, thinking of you. I'm thankful that, you're here. I'm thankful that you're a part of my life." And so I try to remember to do those, but I'm not very good at it. So I don't know who you got.
Yeah, I think for me, there was a man, it wasn't a regular occurrence, but we had a guy at church, Jimmy Nix, that passed away here a couple months ago. I can't tell you how many times he came up after church, shook my hand, and gave me a $20 bill and just said, "Make sure you and Lindsay go get lunch."
And to hear at his funeral that he did that for
lots of people,
tons of people. It wasn't just for one or two. He did it for us too.
I think that little things like that, and he would, it was never a stand and talk. It was just a handshake and he was gone. Little things like that, and I know that to me, that's a big deal, because $20 is a big deal in my life at the moment. So I know that had to be a big deal to him. Yeah. The other thing for me is, I've had people come up here recently and just go, "Hey, I appreciate you." And I would rather at this point in my life have somebody go, "I appreciate you," than give me $100. And I told Lindsay the other day, I said, I think one of my love languages is words of affirmation.
Yeah.
It's like, I think I go fight for somebody just to say, "Hey, I noticed what you did, and I know you screwed up a whole lot, but at least you're trying, and I appreciate that." And so that's made a world of difference. I think, and maybe that's a minister thing sometimes, because I don't know that ministers always get seen for everything they do. There's a guy the other night that goes, "Well, I guess you got your work day tomorrow." I was like, "I wish you'd spend a day with me," and so I think that just that, noticing that somebody's at least trying.
Yep.
And that just means so much to me, here recently.
I don't know if anybody really realizes how much, like, we appreciate, at least I'm that way too. We appreciate a text that just goes, "Hey, I heard what you talked about this morning, and I really appreciated that lesson," or "Thanks for what you did," for whatever. Just that message usually will get me through a Sunday or a tough week, just to get one person that says. So you think when they're walking out, that what they say about it doesn't mean much. But if somebody just makes a comment about something that I talked about, it means a bunch, because it means at least one guy was listening.
For you iPhone users out there, there is a game changer, and it's probably been on the phone for a decade now, and I didn't know it, but the send later text.
Yes.
Man, so awesome. Check it out, because, if you're thinking of somebody, if you're like me, I'll forget to send the text. So it's a game changer to put the text down, set it for 9 a.m. the next day or whatever, so that they get a little boost. Man, there's no excuse for not communicating your affection for another human being with the technology that we have today. I will say, just make sure that it's the right email address and the right phone number.
Thanks for being with us.
And then maybe even sometimes that works out, but you got to be careful. Guys, I appreciate it. You certainly
be sure to download
make my
our
week
free
every week
ebook,
when we get to hang out and talk, kind of just go over stuff and get a good reminder. So thank you for that. You guys have a good
extra
one.
content directly in your inbox. We look forward to having you join us at the same Ben and Travis time, same Ben and Travis channel.